So whenever you're ready.
Okay, are you going to ask?
I can.
What do you want to know?
What advice would you give a first year?
Hello, my name is Jack Lightstone, and I'm the President and Vice Chancellor of Brock University. It's a pleasure for me to offer whatever advice I can to you. What I say to all incoming students is that your education is more than what you learn in your classes.
Welcome to Brock. I really hope that you have a great experience here. The one piece of advice that I found most valuable for my own undergraduate education was not just to invest money in your education, but to invest your time and energy. The point of being here is to get an education, not just to get a degree. So I hope that you're able to learn lots and have a really great experience here.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. So if I had to do it all over again, I know that I would treat my university, especially the first year, I would treat it with the same attitude that I would treat having my first job. In that any time I thought that I could maybe get away with sleeping in rather than going to class or not preparing enough or starting something late, I would compare that to how I would treat a job. Would I simply sleep through a day at work? Or would I not prepare for a meeting at work? Or would I not think it important to sort of put all of myself into a job? And I think if I'd had that attitude in my first year of university would have been a lot more successful. Whenever you hear the guy in residence say, oh yeah, you don't need to go to that class because you can learn it all from the textbook, if that would be your attitude in employment, if that would be okay with you, then obviously you're not going to do very well as, an employee. I always tell my first year class that at the end of the year I always get students who say, I know I didn't earn a 70, but I really need a 70, so can you just give me a 70? And I think, well, think of this as a job. If you only worked 4 hours and you told your boss, but I really need to be paid for 8 hours, or else I'm going to lose my apartment, you'd never get it. So that, if you didn't earn the 70, you don't get the 70.
The other thing which is terribly important is don't wait until the last possible moment to do something. And this also includes showing up to class. I mean, many classes, professors don't take attendance. My first year course, I have over 300 students in it. There's no way I can take attendance that would take up the whole class. In fact, I tell students, I really don't care whether you show up for my classes or not. What I do care about is that you know what I said in class. This has two implications. The first is go to class. You will find that the mere act of sitting in your in the chair and taking down notes, preferably with a pen, because that's much more effective than with a laptop. That's already half the battle, because you'll retain things a lot more easily. Just by that mere process, when it comes time to review the exam, you will remember, things will come back to you. If you do miss a class, however, make sure you get notes from somebody, preferably somebody who has neat handwriting.
Go to all your classes and don't drink while in a class, because it's probably not the smartest unless it's like a Thursday 7 to 10. That's okay.
So that's kind of like when people say, but I'm paying for my tuition. It's like, well,
Yeah.
it's like paying for tuition.
The advice I usually give is if you don't want to go to class, realize that you've just lost $20, $40, right? You're paying to go to this class, so you literally are paying somebody
To do
to
nothing.
skip class.
And it's also, it's not only that, it's worse than that, because you're paying to be penalized. Because every class that you miss, especially if you get into the habit of it, your marks will go down. So you're paying someone to do worse. Right? If you were paying someone to do better, maybe and you know what I mean, if every class that you missed actually was valuable to you, I could almost understand the logic, but you're paying someone to do worse. It's like, why would you do that? If you go to the mall, you pay for something, you get it. Can you imagine going to the mall and paying someone and they took something from you? Thank
That'd
you.
be a terrible
That would be
shop.
the worst shop ever.
Yeah,
But
no.
that's what it's like to miss class. It's like you're paying someone to be disadvantaged. Why would you do that?
Suddenly you're stuck, the sun is setting, the next day you have an exam, and you're thinking, oh my God, I haven't even looked at my lecture notes.
My experience is that students come to office hour the night before the exam, and that's what I call last minute question. And frequently, professors are going to be available for you, but remember that you're not the only one thinking that way. There's going to be a lineup of more than 10 students, and your question is not going to be answered as thoroughly as if you came the class after that material was covered, okay?
Okay, well, I think it's kind of twofold. I would say the first thing is that not to be afraid of your profs. That we're people like you, and we're here for you. So the first part is to not be afraid of us. And the second part, which I think is very important, especially in first year, is to feel free to come and talk to us anytime. Because you may have concerns with like your workload, or things might be going on in your life outside of school that are impacting your school, and we just want to help. And we can't help you after the fact. We can only help you if you let us know what you're going through in that time, and then we can maybe rearrange things, we can work together to ensure your success. So I think that those are the important things that a first year should know when they come to school, is to not be afraid of your profs, and to keep an open channel of communication if you need help, because we want to help. So come and see us.
So on the academic side, I think the big thing is to get to know your professors and to come to their office hours. If you have any questions about the material or about the courses themselves, go and talk to your professors. It's much better for yourself, both for your ability to learn, but also for how the professor will interact with you and think about you when it comes time to grade things, if they can actually put a face to a name. Because when we're dealing with sometimes hundreds of students in a year, it's sometimes easy to get lost in the crowd, but we will always remember the ones who came by and stopped in at our office hours to ask questions about something.
Don't always feel like everything you're going to learn is going to be on campus. If you have an opportunity to do service learning, get involved in your community, get involved in both the university community and the broader community, and enjoy the people that you meet and learn from them, whether it's a retired member of the community or whether it's a 3-year-old in the children's movement program. These are all things that you can learn from.
As far as academics, I would suggest the one thing I've always learned, and something we're finding a lot of first year students aren't able to do as well these days, is to be able to think about why you're doing something academic wise. Just think of why this is important, or why is the instructor or demonstrator asking you to do this. If you're doing a science lab, you go in and you're following a protocol, but why are you following that protocol? If you can get that understanding and be able to know why something is important and why you're doing it, then you will do so much better.
Right. So the advice that I would give to a first year would be to pay close attention to what I often talk about as the invisible side of the learning that happens at university. So what I mean by that is, I think there's lots of learning that happens at university, and I think that the most visible part of the learning is the part that relates to the course content. So, for example, if you're in the English department and you're taking a course in 19th century literature, then the course content is everything that you learn about 19th century literature, whether that comes from a textbook or a lecture or the stuff that you read in the library to prepare for a paper. That's the piece of the learning that students, especially first year students, are very switched on to. They really understand that. But then there's this whole other side of the learning that goes on, which is much less obvious. And part of the reason that it's less obvious is because faculty members don't really talk about it a great deal. They're thinking about it, but they're not always making it very explicit. And that's the piece of the learning that deals with career-related transferable skills. And so, there are lots of career-related skills that students could be concerned about, and some of them are very, very job specific. So if you want to be an accountant, for example, you're probably going to learn skills that are related to mastering software that's associated with taxes and tax returns or doing audits. So that's a very specific kind of job-related or career-related transferable skill. But I think that there are transferable career-related skills that cut across disciplines. So it doesn't matter whether you're pursuing a degree in physics or history or geography. And they are, in my research, we refer to them as the 3 C's. So communication, critical thinking, and collaboration. And those are the skills that I think, regardless of what kind of career you want to go and visit, those are skills that are going to be useful to you. And your instructors in all of your courses are thinking about those skills, and they're designing assignments and projects that will help to foster those skills in addition to teaching you about the course content. But they don't always talk about them. And I think there's some maybe expectation that students will figure that out. And yet, if you think about what's going to happen to you when you go out and try to get a job, one of the things that I talk about in my Transition to Works course for 4th year psychology students is, I promise you that when you are sitting in front of an interviewer, they are never going to ask you to explain what attachment theory is or to explain how a neurotransmitter works. They want to know about the skills you're going to bring to the workplace. Are you a team player? Do you know how to give presentations? And so, taking this back to the original question, what advice would I give to students? It would be to always be aware of how those skills are being fostered during your university learning experiences.
I wouldn't chain myself to a desk. It's not all about books. You have to learn to embrace your extracurriculars, because what you learn at school doesn't all come from a book. It's about what you do while you're learning out of the book.
I think that all first-year students should get intimately familiar with their academic advisors. That's the best way to be successful at Brock. Academic advisors are found in all of the departments across the entire university. Sometimes there's academic advisors in a faculty, sometimes they're for individual departments, and each of those advisors is almost like a guidance counselor at high school, if that's what you're familiar with, but they're not exactly like that. They're more familiar with the university rules and regulations from a degree perspective. They'll be able to tell you how many courses you need at each level, which exact courses are required for your degree. They'll also be able to tell you about the opportunities that are out there as a student.
The other piece of advice I have for you is it's all about organization. You've got to get yourself well organized in order to participate in extracurricular activities, in order to do well in your courses. It's all about staying organized, making sure that every day you make progress on everything that's on your plate, whether it's your extracurricular activities or your coursework or your assignments. Get yourself organized.
All right, so what advice would you give a first year?
I would suggest that they if there's lots of resources on campus, and a lot of us actually know at least where to direct students if they need help with anything, if they have any issues that they want dealt with. There really are so many resources and help on campus available. So please ask anyone that you know that works there, your lab demonstrators or a TA or a seminar, your professors. Everyone here at Brock is like family. We want to help everyone. We want to help every student be able to succeed and to get to where they want to get to.
If you have for certain students, it may be that you are suffering from some kind of anxiety. You should be able to talk to the departmental advisors, and they will help you or direct you to certain appropriate units within the faculty or within the university. So my advice would be that do not suffer in isolation. Seek help as soon as you can. We are here to help.
We've started.
Okay. I'd like to welcome you out of Brock University. The advice for first year students that I would give, I would start with, it's going to be harder than you think. All right? You need to be prepared for that. You need to be ready for it. You need to go get the help that's available when you need to get the help. The second thing I'd like to talk to you a little bit about is how to approach your studies. Potentially what you've classically done, what's worked for you in the past, may work to get through the courses. It depends on your goal. If your goal here is to get an education, what you've done in the past may not be the optimal. If your goal is to just get through and get a degree, then fine. You don't need me to help you do that. What I'm talking about here is the research that's done in neuroscience about how we actually learn. And you've potentially done highlighting, done underlining in your textbook, and you read and you reread and you go back and read some more. And there's a significant body of research that suggests that's not effective. All right, you're going to get what they call surface learning. You'll pass the test, that's not a problem. So you'll get your degree, but you won't hold it, you won't retain it. What you need is what they call deep learning. That's where you want to have things go into the deeper parts of the memory, into the long-term memory versus the short-term memory. How do you do that? Number one, it's hard. If you're not struggling, if you're not making efforts, if it doesn't feel effortful, it's probably not working. So starting with your reading and highlighting, probably not that effective. Make marginal notes, that's much more effective. And in particular, questions. Marginal notes, asking yourself questions, trying to connect it to something you already know. Trying to build a story out of it tends to work better. Recommend flashcards. Create the questions. On one side, if I use these 5x8 cards, they look like this. On one side, you'd put your question. You'd put what a formula is about. On the other side, you'd have your answers, connectors, what the formula is, if it's a formula-based item. Then have these in a pile, essentially, and quiz yourself. I mean, the more you have to retrieve knowledge, all the neuroscience says goes into memory, you then retrieve it, it starts consolidating, then you start forgetting, and the harder you work at retrieving it, the more it starts moving into that long-term memory, the deep learning, that you retain it.
The first advice that comes to my mind is time management. It is absolutely crucial that you manage your time as efficiently as possible. If you are taking a full load, that means you are taking 5 half courses each semester. That's a heavy load. So you have to make sure that you are on top of things. That means as soon as the assignment is given, you start working on it.
Sometimes students ask me, for advice, but unfortunately, they don't usually ask until year 3 or year 4. And then I say, there's really good advice that should be given to first-year students. They all think that success at the university requires that they have a lot of brains, that they're really intellectual, but in fact, they have enough brains already. There is a secret to success, and it's a simple formula. It's hard work. And so if they come in their first year and they devote 4 to 5 hours a day, sometime in that day, in the evening or whenever, 4 to 5 hours a day and 8 to 10 hours on the weekend on their homework assignments and on studying and on reading their notes, rereading their notes, they'll know half the material by the time the midterms roll around, and their grades are going to be really, really high. I've never seen a student who put in that kind of effort who wasn't rewarded. That's my message. If you want to know how to succeed, it's just a simple formula. 4 to 5 hours a day, 8 to 10 hours in the weekend, outside of your class time, and you'll do really, really well. That's it.
What about you? What advice would you give a first year?
Budget your money, because it sucks being broke at the end of the year.
Rule number 1, check your Brock email every day. Rule number 2, go to the fishbowl and have them set up your email on your phone so you can check your Brock email every day. Rule number 3, read your course outlines and know what's in them so that when you go to ask your prof a question about the course, you'll find that you won't have to ask your prof those questions about the course because you already know the answer because it's in your course outline. Can I put that in? And the only other thing I would say for first years is take care of your health when you have the time to do it, because there are going to be moments in each semester when you won't have time to look after yourself. So it's a lot easier to meet your deadlines when you're healthy. So try to take as good care of yourself as you can because you'll be happier for it in the long run.
Be patient with the big lines at Tim Hortons. We're doing our best. There you go.
So don't be afraid to take a course because someone's told you that it's challenging. Follow, your own gut and go to topics that are more interesting to you, because then you're more likely to actually want to put in the effort to study that material and learn about it, rather than a course that might be easy but it's really dry information, something that's not very interesting.
Honestly, just do your readings and make sure you do all your assignments because they can really screw up your plans if you don't.
Let's have some.
Nice.
No.
Cheers.
Yes.
The other piece of advice is don't believe everything that you hear. You'll hear rumors. You'll hear things about assignments. It's best to check all of that out before you act on it. Things often get minimized or magnified or whatever, and it's best to go to the source.
Follow your passion. That's a bit cliche, but sometimes it's easy to get caught in a status quo and just finishing something that maybe you're not so sure you're passionate about at the end of the day. So
make sure that when you attend your classes, that you make a point of sitting up towards the front. It's always immensely helpful for a professor to actually get a good look at your face and to get used to seeing you. So being up front and showing up regularly is going to increase the chances that the professor is going to know who you are, particularly in the larger classes. Secondly, introduce yourself. Go up and say, "Hi, my name is," and tell them that they probably won't remember, but that you're going to show up more than once. Third, go to their office hours. Be sure to go to their office hours. Let me say that again. Go to their office hours. It's probably one of the most effective things you can do. Even if you don't have a particular question, go and talk about the class. Once again, it's a way of getting the professor to be familiar with you so that when your paper comes in, when your test comes in, they recognize and connect your name with your face with the conversation they had with in their office, and that's going to be helpful to you.
Be open to growth.
The other thing that I would recommend that you do is when you take notes on lectures, make sure that you don't just write down the bullet points on the PowerPoint. Actually, those are the least important parts of the lecture. The most important parts of the lecture are in fact the things that are said between the bullet points. And so when you get to an essay or you get to a test, it's quite likely that the professor is not going to ask you questions about the bullet points, but they are going to ask you questions about what came between the bullet points. So be absolutely sure that you're taking notes, not just on the bullet points, but on all the stuff that's said between, and don't ignore stories. Professors will tell you stories. Now, if you're going to write an essay particularly, those stories are going to be really, really good information for you to use when you're using examples. So those stories can constitute or make up the examples that you're going to use in your essays or in your writing. So pay attention to the stories. Don't just kind of go, "Oh, well, that's sort of interesting." In fact, they're critical.
I would tell a first-year student to make sure that they have balance. So balance in their life between school and work and I guess any kind of social life, whether that be with their parents or their peers. I think it's important that students have balance because I find that we have students who are either too far one way or too far the other, too far involved in schools or too far involved in their schoolwork or too far involved in their social life. And then one of those will suffer. And so I think that when I see students that are too involved in their studies, they forget that there is a whole world out there, and they get a little too anxious around their schoolwork. And then students who are too involved in their social life miss classes, miss assignments, and just don't get enough done.
Ever you're ready, darling.
I would tell a first year student to check their email on a daily basis because professors email you every day, we email you, and the residents emails you so that you have important notices to be notified of.
Like what kind of notices?
Notices that you have a package, that you have a mail, that you don't have class at 8 a.m. in the morning, or that the entire campus is canceled because of snow.
That's really useful. Thank you.
That's awesome.
It's okay. It's all right if you're confused. It's all right if you don't understand. And it's all right if, in fact, you're feeling some anxiety about what's being presented to you. Again.
Honestly, my number one advice is do something that scares the crap out of you. In my first year, I didn't really do anything. I kind of just chilled in my room, I studied, didn't really push myself outside of my limits. And then in second year, I took on a job that was not exactly of the norm, I guess. And it really pushed me with my own self-confidence and my own self-esteem. And now I have bundles of it, so do something that scares the crap out of you.
And don't be one of those folks who thinks that, oh, I just want to be totally comfortable all of the time in class. Sometimes you're not going to be comfortable. Sometimes it's going to be painful because learning can be difficult. But it is entirely and utterly worthwhile.
And finally, have fun. You know, I think Brock environment is a friendly environment. I know there is the education world, but there is also the enjoyment world. You got to enjoy. You got to do some sport. You got to have a good time management. You have time to work hard, but you got to have time also to enjoy the university experience, you know.
The last thing that I'm going to recommend to you is that you get used to the idea that learning can be painful.
Okay. I would tell the first years to get involved in as many things as you can. There's a lot of cool things that happen on the campus, particularly at Center for the Arts. There's a lot of cool shows here, and there's also a lot of cool clubs and that offer the opportunity for you to meet new people and make new groups of friends. I think just put yourself out there, really.
Last thing I'm going to tell you. I think I just told you the last thing, but I'm going to tell you one more last thing. If you get to a place in the term where you're in some kind of crisis and you're not completing the work, make sure you go see the professor as soon as possible. If in fact you come to me and you say at the end of the term, boy, I had a horrible experience, something terrible happened in my life and I didn't get the work done, at the very end of the class, there's not much I can do for you. If you come to me in the middle of the class, as soon as you know you're in trouble, there might be something we can work out. So come early, come often, make office hours. If you're in crisis, come talk to your professor and see if they can work with you. There you go. Good luck. I hope your term goes well. Have a great first year.
That's what I got.
That's amazing.
Okay.
Anything else you want to say?
No, I guess that's it.
Perfect.